Hi guys, it's Dylan from Bijou Diamond Jewellery in London with another watch video, and today we're taking a look at the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak 15500. If you want to learn about the history of the Royal Oak, then please go check out my in-depth review looking at the Royal Oak Extra Thin, which features all the in-depth information about how Audemars Piguet introduced it into their collection, how the watch was received back then, etc, etc. This one I'm not really going to look at the history. I'm actually more so going to look at the actual features of this brand new release from 2019 SIHH. So like I said, this new reference 15500, this one is the rose gold with the strap, was released this year at SIHH 2019. It replaces the 15400 reference that we saw from 2012 back in SIHH 2012, which marked the 40th anniversary for the Royal Oak for Audemars Piguet. That's been an incredibly popular watch for many years. In fact, immediately from its release in 2012, it was very, very popular. But Audemars Piguet has really updated this watch and given it some new features. So let's break down the watch and have a look at different stuff that they've changed on this piece. So we're going to start with the clasp. The clasp is weeny bit different on this model versus the old models. It's got a little bit more depth to the actual fold over part of the clasp. The bit you see that says Audemars Piguet, there's just a little bit more depth to it versus the older clasps. Absolute minor change, something you probably will not notice at all. Next, moving on to the straps. The bracelets are exactly the same that we had on the old models as well, the same clasp on the bracelets too. So in terms of that, and the straps also, there's no change at all. Just quickly on briefly of which models they've released. So they've really boiled down and whittled down what options are available. There's actually now only 5 options available for this 15500 versus the 15400 had quite a few options in terms of dial, strap combos. There's now only 3 steel variations you can get, which is the black dial, the blue dial, and also the grey dial. And in terms of rose gold, you can only buy it with the black dial, either on a bracelet or a strap. So they've definitely whittled down the collection there. Hopefully that means they're looking to add some new dials and combos later on next year at SIHH 2020. So coming back to the features on the watch, now moving on to the case. This is where we'll see most of the changes on this watch, is the case. We've got a beautiful clear crystal case back on this watch, which hasn't changed at all since the last one. What has changed though is the movement. This new 15500 features the caliber 4302, which is a new, updated, improved movement. There were some issues with the old 15400, or with certain people they experienced some issues. We never experienced it with any of our clients here at Bijou Diamond Jewellery, but some people reported issues with that movement, which has now been addressed with this new variation, the new caliber 4302. This movement features a greater power reserve from 60 hours on the old one now to 70 hours of power reserve on the 4302. It also has some other reliability improvements, like I said. This actually is the same movement that they put in the code 1159, so a really cool new movement, in-house movement from Audemars Piguet for this watch. That's probably one of the most important changes on this watch versus the old one, the 15400. Looking at the case again, the case is actually slightly deeper on this watch to accommodate for the slightly thicker movement on this newer model. So this one has gone, I believe, from around 9.8mm thick to 10.4mm thick on this newer reference. So just a little bit thicker, nothing major, and you kind of don't notice it too much every day, during everyday use. I actually do prefer the slightly greater depth on this watch. Moving on now to the dial, this is probably where we'll see the most changes on this watch. Overall, they've really looked to space this dial out and make it much more legible versus the old 15400. The 15500 features actually a much more simple dial. In fact, everything's pushed right to the edges. For example, our date window on this watch is pushed right to the edge now. It's also changed the font on the date window to a slightly more blocky style of font for the numbers. The index markers are much chunkier, and also the hands as well, a little bit more chunkier too. That just adds to the overall legibility of the watch, helps make it much more legible. They also added some extra contrast to those seconds markers around the edge of the dial. That's not so obvious on this watch with the black dial, but on the other models this is much more obvious. It's kind of raised out on its own level almost, the way it looks. which is really cool, totally different to what they did for the 15400. The logo on the watch is also much larger than the old 15400, and there's also no automatic writing at kind of 6 o'clock area on this watch, and that's something I really miss about this watch versus the older reference. I think that older reference having that automatic down there kind of balanced out the dial. We now have this massive open space kind of around 6 o'clock on this watch, and I think it makes the dial look massive and therefore makes the watch look absolutely huge as well. Fortunately, they've added some extra depth, which does help to make the watch not feel too large now or too dinner plate-ish. But yeah, that's something I don't like about this watch versus the old reference, is the way they've rearranged the dial and removed that automatic sign or writing. And we also have a slight change to where it says Swiss made at 6 o'clock as well. On the old watch it was much smaller, this one it's slightly more legible, more obvious. I mean, that really concludes the features on this watch. There's not that many changes overall to the timepiece, but they are obvious. The depth probably is the biggest change that you'll really feel when it's on your wrist. The spaciness of that dial with that date window pushed right to the extreme, and kind of the removal of that automatic writing really makes everything look so spaced out, makes the watch definitely wear so much larger than the old 15400 in my opinion. But yeah, overall still an absolutely beautiful watch. The movement changes are very, very welcome on this watch. It means that it's going to be a little bit more reliable than the older reference, but not that the older reference was that particularly unreliable. But yeah, it's a nice improvement to have on this watch, seeing that the movement that they used to use was actually quite old. So yeah, a great little addition to this watch. Some really nice little changes to the dial and case overall. Personally, which do I prefer, or would I own this new reference? Personally, I wouldn't own this new reference. Personally, I prefer the 15400 reference over this one. Perhaps one day we can do a comparison to the old one, but a great watch nonetheless from Audemars Piguet, and it's nice to see that they're changing up and redesigning an absolute classic model in their collection. Thanks guys for watching. Let us know in the comments what you think of this new reference 15500 from Audemars Piguet. Do you prefer this one or the older reference 15400? Let us know what other watches you'd like us to review as well. And as always, if you're interested in this watch from Audemars Piguet, then don't hesitate to contact us. Our details are in the description and also the end of the video. It'd be a pleasure to call this watch into stock for you.